Sunday night, 11 p.m., the house is quiet. You're in bed, but sleep doesn't come. It's not insomnia, it's not anxiety in the clinical sense. It's something quieter, a low hum inside the chest that's been there so long you stopped noticing it. The sound of numbers you owe, payments you haven't made yet, a version of your life that belongs in pieces to someone else. You've been told this is normal. You've been told everyone lives this way. You've been told that debt is a sophisticated tool wielded by the financially savvy to build wealth. You accepted that, internalized it, built your life around it. But here's what no one says at the car dealership, at the mortgage closing. At the moment you swipe the card, every payment you make is a vote you cast against your own future freedom. And you've been casting those votes for years without realizing it. The average American carries $96,000 in personal debt, not the destitute. The average, the person with the house, the car, the student loans that were supposed to unlock a better life. Nearly 70% of Americans report financial anxiety right now, but that anxiety isn't really about the numbers. Numbers are manageable. You can stare at a spreadsheet without flinching. The anxiety is about something far older, something Epictetus, a man who was literally born a slave, understood better than any modern financial advisor. When you owe, you are not free, not just financially, cognitively, emotionally. In the quiet calculations, your brain runs at 11 p.m. while you're supposed to be resting. You don't just owe money, you owe choices. Every month you have a car payment. You can't take the job that pays 20% less but lights you up. Every month you carry credit card debt. You can't take the risk that might change everything. You've sold something that never appears on any statement. You've sold options on your own life, and the interest rate on those is paid not in dollars, but in the gradual narrowing of who you're allowed to become. What I'm going to show you in the next few minutes isn't a debt repayment plan. There are thousands of those. What I'm going to show you is a completely different relationship with debt, rooted not in spreadsheets, but in a 2,000-year-old understanding of what it means to be sovereign. And by the end, you'll have the Stoic Avalanche, a method for eliminating debt that doesn't start where conventional wisdom tells you to start, because conventional wisdom is exactly what built the cage you're sitting in. The phrase "good debt" may be the most profitable lie in the history of personal finance. Here's the logic: borrow for appreciating assets, avoid borrowing for depreciating ones. Mortgage good, car loan bad. Student loan depends on the return, makes sense on paper. But here's what Seneca wrote 2,000 years before FICO scores existed. It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the man who perpetually reaches for more. He wasn't describing a balance sheet. He was describing the psychological architecture of a person in permanent obligation. Every piece of debt, good or bad by conventional standards, represents a future payment your future self is contractually required to make. Your mortgage doesn't care that you got promoted. Your student loans don't care that you're going through a difficult year. Your car payment doesn't care that a bold move in your career requires a temporary drop in income. The lie of good debt isn't that it never builds wealth. Sometimes it does. The lie is that it is cost-free beyond the interest rate. It isn't. The real cost is a permanent reduction in behavioral flexibility, an invisible fence around the range of choices your life is allowed to include. But there's a second layer, and this one is harder to admit. Most consumer debt in America isn't debt for survival. It is identity debt. It is borrowed money used to project a version of yourself that hasn't yet been earned through discipline or time. The $700 car payment isn't just transportation, it's a signal. It says something about the person you believe you are, or the person you desperately need others to believe you are. The kitchen renovation on the home equity line, the vacations charged to the card, the wardrobe bought in February and paid off in September. Psychologists call this anticipatory consumption, purchasing the lifestyle of a future self before that self has been built. And this isn't weakness, it's design. The entire architecture of Western consumer culture is engineered to close the gap between who you are and who you want to be with a single transaction. It cannot be closed that way. The gap widens, because the debt taken on to buy a borrowed identity also accrues interest, and while you're paying installments on the person you pretended to be, the person you actually want to become is still waiting. Here's where conventional wisdom tries to comfort you. Inflation erodes your debt over time. Technically true. A $300,000 mortgage is repaid with dollars worth slightly less every year. The math works in your favor on paper. But here's the inversion that changes everything. Inflation may reduce the real value of your debt, but it has never, not once in the history of human psychology, reduced the psychological weight of your monthly obligation. Your brain doesn't calculate inflation-adjusted returns, it calculates certainty. And the certainty of a $2,400 mortgage payment, regardless of macroeconomic conditions, constrains every ambitious decision you might make in the same month. Neuroscientists call this cognitive load. When your financial future is pre-allocated to creditors, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for creative thinking, bold decisions, and long-term planning, operates under permanent diminished capacity. You are not just financially constrained, you are neurologically constrained. The chains aren't on your wrists, they're in your thinking. This is why the standard advice to build 3 to 6 months of expenses as an emergency fund, while necessary, is structurally incomplete. Emergency funds protect against catastrophe. What you need, what a Stoic would prescribe, is not just a shield against disaster. It's a tranquility fund, a reserve whose purpose isn't to survive emergencies, but to preserve the quality of your deliberation. The Tranquility Fund changes the entire psychological equation. When you have 3 months of expenses in liquid cash, untouched, not invested, you negotiate your salary differently. You respond to your manager differently. You assess every opportunity through different eyes. $1,000 in a separate account, ring-fenced as off-limits, moves you from a posture of survival into a posture of choice. Marcus Aurelius called it the retreat within, the internal fortress from which no external circumstance can steal your peace. The Tranquility Fund is the financial architecture of that retreat. Build it before you attack your debt. Without it, every debt elimination effort runs on desperation, and desperation makes poor strategic decisions. Now we sit with the uncomfortable part for just a moment. If you have $700 in car payments, $1,200 in minimum credit card payments, $450 in student loans, and a take-home of $6,000, then 40% of your future has already been decided. Before you wake up, before you choose anything. 40% of your available will was surrendered by a past version of you, operating under social pressure, financial anxiety, and a perfectly engineered illusion that those purchases were necessary for belonging. That hum you feel on Sunday nights, that's not anxiety. That's the sound of freedom being subtracted from you in monthly installments. The standard debt avalanche, the mathematically optimal method, tells you to attack the highest interest rate first. It saves the most money over time. The Stoic Avalanche respectfully disagrees. Not because math is wrong, because math doesn't live in your body. The Stoic Avalanche asks a different question: which debt most compromises your peace of mind, not which debt charges the most in interest rate analysis. Which debt, when it appears on your statement, tightens something behind your sternum, which obligation most narrows your choices, which creditor holds the most keys to your behavioral freedom. For most people, that's the car, visible, social, monthly. For others, it's the credit card because it represents the identity they borrowed money to perform. For some, it's the smallest balance, not because of the math, but because eliminating it would prove, for the first time in years, that change is possible. Attack that one first. Minimum payments on everything else. Every dollar above the minimum on that single account is a declaration of intent. Because debt elimination isn't just financial restructuring, it's psychological rewiring, and the fastest way to rewire a brain is to give it evidence that it can win. One eliminated obligation expands the range of your choices. One fewer payment is one more option. Options are the currency of freedom, and you've been spending that currency without knowing it. Here is the map. First, build your Tranquility Fund, $1,000 immediately in a separate account you do not touch, not when it's convenient, this week. Cut one unnecessary subscription, one dinner out, one impulse purchase. This is not a financial decision. This is a declaration of psychological sovereignty. Second, list every debt by the weight it places on your peace, not by interest rate. The statement that makes your stomach drop. The payment you dread seeing leave your account. That is your target. Third, apply everything available above minimum payments to that single debt. When it's gone, pause, feel the space it leaves. That space was always yours. Then move to the next one. This is also debt consolidation in its truest form, not moving balances around, but consolidating your attention into a single point of elimination at a time. Epictetus, the man born into slavery who became one of the most cited philosophers in Western history, understood something no financial algorithm can calculate. Freedom is not a balance. Freedom is the absence of obligations that force your hand. The goal is not wealth. Wealth without freedom is a gilded cage, nicer furniture, same walls. The goal is a life with 0 monthly debt payments beyond services you choose, not because you're poor, because you're sovereign. because every dollar that was once pre-allocated to a creditor is now pre-allocated to the life you actually designed. There is a Sunday night coming. It can feel exactly like tonight. Or if you start this week, it can feel different, not triumphant, just quiet. The hum is gone, and in that silence, for the first time in years, you can finally hear what you actually want. That is the map, the rest is movement.